Thank you, Derek. In most official college publications, Dr. David Suda is listed as Professor of Humanities. As I learned a little bit more about his career, I can see why that simple three-word term was used. You have taken up too many lines to say Professor of Music, Philosophy, Literature, Religious Studies, with a little bit of art history thrown in. In the field of music, he was a concert master for the Knox-Galesburg Symphony and a member of the Monmouth Trio. His wide-ranging academic interests have enabled him to teach an impressive variety of courses at Monmouth, including some that he pioneered for our honors program, which he helped create. So when it came time to pin a short title next to his name, it was either Professor of Humanities or Renaissance Man. Professor won out. As new Monmouth College students, one of our first lectures we hear presented in the Dahl Chapel auditorium and is called Introduction to the Liberal Arts. For many years, Dr. Suda presented that lecture. As he reaches his retirement, including an outstanding 27-year career at Monmouth, we're calling on him one more time to tell us about what it means to receive the type of liberal arts education that our college provides. I now invite Dr. David Suda to deliver his commencement address.
Thank you, Trevor, and thank you, President Zisler, for according me the privilege of speaking on this significant occasion. I want first to congratulate the class of 2011. Your dedication, discipline, and labor have carried you through, and you have prevailed. You rightly are to be honored. As I was preparing my thoughts for this brief talk, I pondered what possibly I might say to you that was not a rehash of tired cliches and outworn metaphors. It occurred to me, however, that you and I share something at this moment, even though more than 40 years, well, actually closer to more than 50 years of life separate us. You see, as you heard, I too am commencing onto a phase utterly novel to my experience. It is a situation that calls for a bit of calm reflection. This is the last official responsibility I have to do. At the conclusion of this ceremony, I formally will have retired from the faculty. Another way of saying it is that I have fulfilled all the requirements for graduation from Monmouth College, and I think I ought to have the number 11. The next question is, of course, now what? That may sound familiar to some of you. And so for you and for me too, in a few moments we will be on to our futures. And in fact, we will need to begin the task of sorting through what Monmouth College has been to us while we were here, and what it means to us in our newfound presence and place. But now, and in this place, you are right to be excited about a job well accomplished. Surely you eagerly anticipate a world to come, even if the prospect is a bit confused and unfocused for some of you. At least this much is done, and you can turn your heads to the future. There are good reasons why the ceremony is known as commencement, and that is what I want to speak of today. I want to spend a few minutes considering what a commencement is and what its ramifications are for you and for all of our lives. For commencements can be magnificent entrances, ushering us into new, sometimes unimagined worlds. Those worlds can be wonderland, treasured by immeasurable delights and joys. Those worlds, too, can be places of darkness and not at all pleasant. Commencements are portals through which we approach the future. They are ritual moments of passage by which we signify our progress from one season to another, from one age to another. They are formal acknowledgments of leave-taking. The Commencement is the nodal point from which we bid our farewells as we take leave of one life and so begin another. And truly, once you have passed through that portal, you are a part of history. Who you were in that past, who you are in this present transition, who you will be once you have lived through this rite of passage, may all be quite ambiguous. Because of that passage, tomorrow morning or next week or next year, after the dust has settled, don't be alarmed if you look into the mirror one morning and you are seized by a reflection of someone familiar, yet somehow alien. The outlines and contours of your face may have become indistinct, and there is something vague about yourself and about, well, everything else. The portal has deposited you onto terra incognita. Things, and that includes you, may be curiously recognizable, but they and you are not on familiar terms. Uneasiness may descend upon you, your stomach may be queasy. As you pass through the portal, some of what was you has been left behind, and that part of you now resides in the past. That missing part has not been quite fulfilled by some other you, but you will have the power and ability to decide how you want this new portion of your life to take shape. Look at it this way. You thought you were fully licensed to drive a car, when actually you were zipping around town with just a learner's permit. And you know what may cross your mind as you gaze at that reflection of someone you call you? Maybe you do not have a permanent driver's license after all. Maybe we all come to realize that each of us has a learner's permit in life, and periodically we have to re-examine our lives in order to renew the license. If you find you are confused about who you are, you could try burying the issue with denials, avoidances, busy work, more work. You could go on a shopping spree, get married, have a baby, get divorced, go to graduate school, move to Timbuktu, whatever you think will make the ambiguity go away. But in masking the issue of who you are now, those ploys won't solve the thing. Denial only serves to make matters worse. The sages in every age and in all cultures just smile and shake their heads at those stratagems. The honest storytellers and myth-makers, the wise philosophers and preachers have all told us over and again that denials and lies are just what they are. They are the means by which we deceive ourselves. Sometimes you have to confront the confusion head-on. Nothing less will do. For what has happened is no less important than a threat to your well-being. Hence why it is that we talk of renewal, rebirth, enlightenment, and of transformation. Hence why it is that we listen to the words of Socrates, Jesus, Mohammed, and the Buddha. Here's how one of our own contemporaries, the philosopher Cornel West, identifies this issue of misplaced or forgotten or absent selves. I think his words are particularly clear. They are both elegant and eloquent. The statement is part of a filmed interview from about 2 years ago, taken while West extemporizes from the back seat of a minivan driving through rush hour traffic in Manhattan. Here's what he had to say in part. You can't talk about truth without talking about learning how to die, because it's precisely by learning how to die, examining yourself, and transforming your old self into a better self, that you actually live more intensely and critically and abundantly. So that the connection between learning how to die and changing, being transformed, turning your world upside down, inverting your world, so that you actually are in a different kind of zone. You have a new self. That's why love is so inseparable from any talk about truth and death. Because we know that love is fundamentally the death of an old self that was isolated and the emergence of a new self, now entangled with another self, the self you fall in love with. Cornel West's statement here is a riff on the 16th century philosopher Michel de Montaigne, who has an essay entitled, "To Philosophize is to Learn How to Die." The title is taken from the Roman thinker Cicero, who borrowed the idea from Socrates. In West's hand, Montaigne's rumination about one's physical demise becomes a metaphor for self-transformation, of the necessity to examine from time to time one's beliefs, aspirations, fears, and anxieties, whether one is in a crisis or not. In the absence of such scrutiny, one runs the risk of existing by the numbers, of doing someone else's bidding, of advocating ideas and beliefs not truly your own. In short, you run the risk of not really living, of not really being there. Once you admit to yourself that each one of us is a work in progress, that the so-called truths we tell one another might all be provisional, that ad hoc formulations might be standing in for ineffable mysteries, then the sooner you might realize you can't have it all, can't know it all, can't do it all, and that might be a relief to have learned. As you clamber up the ladders of your careers, take time out every now and then. As Montaigne well knew in practice, you too need to find a room at the back of the shop, a place and a time for your own, so to touch base with yourself, to query yourself about how it's all going now. As some of you know, Maury Schwartz was a professor at Brandeis University. After he was diagnosed as having amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, Lou Gehrig's disease, he had a series of conversations with a former student, Mitch Elba. Speaking directly, simply, and candidly, Maury imparts to Mitch lessons he's learned over a lifetime. These conversations were published after Maury's death as Tuesdays with Maury. Here is Maury on Meaningful Life. So many people walk around with a meaningless life. They seem half asleep, even when they're busy doing things they think are important. This is because they're chasing the wrong things. The way you get meaning into your life is to devote yourself to loving others, devote yourself to your community around you, and devote yourself to creating something that gives you purpose and meaning. The candor and grace within Tuesdays with Maury testify that Maury himself practiced his own advice. Devote yourself to loving, to your community, and to doing meaningful work. Those three devotions demand commitment, concern, and time. They call us to care for our neighbor as well as ourselves. Significantly, they imply that to be is to be with. Soon you will begin the next chapter of your lives. I hope your time at Monmouth College has given you the tools with which to follow through with the advice that Cornel West and Maury Schwartz offer. Take time out every now and then to re-examine what it is you are doing and why you are doing it. Let me conclude with the text of a voiceover from the end of Woody Allen's movie, Crimes and Misdemeanors. A statement influenced by both Dostoevsky and Sartre. I think it makes my point better than I could do. We are all faced throughout our lives with agonizing decisions, moral choices. Some are on a grand scale. Most of those choices are on lesser points. But we define ourselves by the choices we have made. We are, in fact, the sum total of our choices. Events unfold so unpredictably, so unfurling. Human happiness does not seem to have been included in the design of creation. It is only we, with our capacity to love, that gives meaning to the indifferent universe. And yet, most human beings seem to have the ability to keep trying, and even to find joy from simple things like their family, their work, and from the hope that future generations might understand more. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you, Professor Suda, and thank you for your decades of service to this college. You have been a star among this great faculty of discerning thought, articulate expression, humane living, and the power of the liberal arts. We are grateful.